Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. You know, we love tackling those intriguing topics you send our way, and today's source is no exception. We're diving into a SciShow article with a pretty thought-provoking title, Should You Stop Your Period? It really gets you thinking, doesn't it?
Definitely a conversation starter, wouldn't you
Sure.
say? It's fascinating how something so seemingly fundamental as menstruation is being re-examined in light of new scientific understanding and societal shifts.
Absolutely. I mean, most of us have just accepted it as part of life month after month. But this article challenges that assumption head on.
It really does. It delves into this growing trend of menstrual suppression, particularly through contraception, and asks some crucial questions about the necessity and potential benefits of, well, not having a period at all.
It makes you wonder if it's as essential as we've always been led to believe. The article even starts with an anecdote about a doctor who actively chooses to suppress her period for convenience. It makes you pause and think, is this just about easier living, or is there a more profound scientific basis for this choice?
That's a great point. The article doesn't shy away from exploring both the personal motivations and the scientific evidence surrounding menstrual suppression.
It's like, in the context of our modern lives, is having a period every month truly a biological imperative?
Exactly. And to unpack that cushion, the article takes a fascinating look back at the evolutionary history of menstruation. What's truly eye-opening is that for the vast majority of human existence, periods were actually far less frequent than they are today.
Yeah, I was amazed by that too. Prehistoric times, right? They mentioned women likely menstruated something like 2.8 times less often than we do now. What accounts for such a huge difference?
Well, think about it. Back then, a large portion of a woman's reproductive years would have been spent either pregnant or breastfeeding.
Right, both of those states naturally stop ovulation and therefore menstruation.
Precisely. So the monthly cycle that many experience now is, in many ways, a consequence of modern lifestyles and, of course, the widespread use of contraception.
It's like our bodies, from an evolutionary standpoint, may not have been designed for this constant cycling.
Exactly. And that historical context is really crucial for understanding the difference between what the article calls natural and artificial menstrual suppression, which they clearly distinguish to avoid any misconceptions.
Right, because I know sometimes when your period stops naturally, it can be a cause for concern. They draw a line between natural amenorrhea and using contraception to suppress periods.
Yes, a critical distinction. Natural amenorrhea, the absence of menstruation, often points to an underlying problem, maybe malnutrition, extreme stress, or certain hormonal imbalances. As the SciShow article points out, that's usually not a desirable state.
But artificial suppression, on the other hand, is a planned outcome of using hormonal birth control.
Exactly. That's what we're zeroing in on in this deep dive.
Yeah.
And when done correctly, it's a very different scenario.
Okay, that clears it up. One can be a warning sign, while the other is a deliberate choice using medical tools. Speaking of those tools, the article reveals a surprising tidbit about the history of the birth control pill itself.
Right. Isn't it fascinating? When the pill was first approved way back in 1957, its purpose wasn't solely to prevent pregnancy. Initially, it was also intended for regulating those menstrual cycles.
Wow, I had no idea. So the idea of influencing the cycle was there from the get-go. And then, of course, we have the standard 21 days of active pills followed by that 7-day placebo week, which is what most people associate with the pill. They talk about the bleeding during that week off what they call withdrawal bleeding. How is that different from an actual period?
That's such a vital distinction. The bleeding you experience during that break isn't a true menstrual period in the physiological sense. It's what we call a withdrawal bleed, and it's basically triggered by that sudden drop in hormone levels when you stop taking the active pills. Your body isn't going through that same complex hormonal cascade that occurs during a natural menstrual cycle.
Interesting. So it's more of a reaction to coming off the hormones than a period itself. And then they discuss the newer versions of the pill that allow for continuous use, basically letting you skip that withdrawal bleed entirely. The big question, and I'm sure it's on many listeners' minds, is whether that's safe.
Absolutely. That's where the SciShow piece dives into the physiological effects and potential risks of menstrual suppression. They acknowledge that safety is a primary concern and address it head on. It's worth starting with blood clots because that's a risk that's quite well known in connection with those estrogen-containing contraceptives.
Yeah, that's definitely a major worry that comes to mind. And they do quantify the increased risk, stating it can be up to 6 times higher for those on the pill compared to people not using hormonal contraception. That sounds like a pretty significant jump.
It does sound substantial, and it's crucial information to have. However, the article also provides important context by highlighting that the risk of developing blood clots during pregnancy itself is actually higher than the risk associated with using hormonal contraception.
So it's about understanding the relative risks in different situations.
Precisely.
Okay, so blood clots are a recognized risk, greater than for someone not on contraception, but less than during pregnancy. What about bone health? The article mentions potential impacts there, particularly for younger individuals.
They delved into the potential interplay between hormonal cycles and bone development, particularly for those under 25 whose bones are still growing and maturing. The article explains that suppressing menstruation might interfere with growth hormones. Think of them as the building blocks for your bones, potentially leading to a slight decrease in bone density.
Okay, a slight decrease. Is that something that could cause serious problems down the road?
The SciShow article offers some reassurance, stating that these effects are generally reversible once hormonal contraception is stopped. Plus, the reduction in bone density associated with menstrual suppression in this age group is usually less severe than the bone loss that occurs naturally during menopause.
That's good to know. Another point the article raises is the idea of a more active immune system.
Right. Some research suggests that hormonal birth control can lead to a rise in specific markers of inflammation in the body. Now, these inflammatory markers have also been observed in individuals with autoimmune diseases like lupus or Crohn's disease.
Does that mean hormonal contraception directly causes those autoimmune diseases?
The SciShow article is careful to clarify that while there's evidence of increased inflammatory markers in some users, it doesn't necessarily equate to a definite increase in diagnoses of those autoimmune conditions. However, it does raise a point for consideration, and those who have a family history of autoimmune issues, they might want to discuss this potential connection with their healthcare provider and perhaps explore other options.
That sounds like sound advice. Let's move on to something that's often at the forefront of these conversations. Mental health, specifically depression. The article mentions that the research on this has shown mixed results.
It's true. The relationship between using hormonal contraception and mental well-being is complex and still being actively researched. Some studies suggest a potential link between hormonal contraceptive use and a higher likelihood of needing antidepressants, while others haven't found a significant connection or have even reported positive effects on mood for some individuals. It really varies.
They specifically highlight a large study from Denmark in 2016, one that involved over 1 million participants. What were the key takeaways from that research?
What's interesting about that study is its scale, and it did find an increased chance of women receiving their first antidepressant prescription after starting hormonal contraception. Interestingly, this effect seems stronger with non-oral methods like injections or implants compared to the pill.
They even suggest a possible explanation for this, the impact of progestin, a type of hormone commonly found in contraceptives, on serotonin. And we know serotonin is a crucial chemical messenger in the brain that plays a big role in mood regulation.
Exactly. It's a plausible biological mechanism. But it's really important to remember that correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because two things occur together doesn't mean one directly causes the other. Mental health is influenced by so many factors.
Absolutely. So we've talked about some of the potential risks. Now, the SciShow article does a great job of presenting a balanced view by outlining the many benefits of menstrual suppression. And it's certainly not just about convenience, is it?
Not at all. For many individuals, suppressing menstruation can provide significant relief from a range of medical conditions. The article mentions things like endometriosis and PCOS, where stopping or reducing menstruation can really ease painful symptoms and drastically improve their quality of life. It also highlights the benefits for those who experience heavy menstrual bleeding or premenstrual dysphoric disorder, a much more severe form of PMS.
Those are all conditions that can have a really significant impact on a person's daily life. And beyond those more common medical reasons, the article also touches on some less frequent but still valuable advantages.
Like the convenience factor for certain professions.
Exactly. Astronauts or military personnel, for instance, where managing menstruation in those unique operational settings could be logistically challenging or even pose safety risks.
In those situations, menstrual suppression can be a truly practical and beneficial option.
And then perhaps the most impactful benefit, especially on a global scale, is the prevention of unintended pregnancies. This is particularly significant in areas with limited resources.
Absolutely. When access to healthcare is limited and pregnancy carries greater risks, reliable contraception, especially one that offers the option of menstrual suppression, can truly be life-changing. It empowers individuals to have greater control over their reproductive health and their futures.
So it seems like we're looking at a balancing act between potential risks and substantial benefits. And the SciShow article really emphasizes that this isn't a one-size-fits-all decision, right?
Absolutely not. While they stress that menstrual suppression is generally considered safe and has been approved by the FDA, there are potential side effects, and each person's body may react differently.
Individual factors like age, overall health history, and even the specific type of contraception used all play a crucial role.
Precisely. And that brings us to what I believe is the core message of the SciShow article: the crucial importance of a personalized consultation with a healthcare provider. The decision to suppress menstruation or not should be made collaboratively with a doctor or qualified medical professional. They can assess an individual's specific health circumstances, discuss the various contraceptive options, and help them carefully weigh those potential risks and benefits.
So for you, the listener, the key takeaway from this deep dive is that menstrual suppression is a scientifically supported option that can offer real advantages for many. But it's a personal decision that requires careful thought and a thorough conversation with your healthcare provider.
The science presented really challenges that long-held belief that having monthly periods is simply a non-negotiable part of being healthy. We now have choices, and understanding the science behind those choices is empowering.
It has been a fascinating deep dive for sure. Makes you wonder, considering how much our understanding of the menstrual cycle has evolved, what other long-held beliefs about our bodies might be challenged by future scientific discoveries, right?
It's to ponder.
Definitely. We encourage you to keep exploring this topic and have those important conversations with your healthcare providers. Thanks for joining us today.
Until next time.